that there's no law saying that Black children can't read and write and go to school, but you see a lot of Black children who don't want to read, who don't want to write, who don't want to go to school. Right. And or there's no law saying that every Black boy or 60% of the Black boys have to grow up wanting to be rappers or basketball players. But, that's kind of the phenomenon, right? Like the majority of Black boys end up wanting to become rappers and basketball players. And if you talk to some of them about doing other things with their amazing skill, that's not as interesting, right? So these social constructs are things that tend to work when everybody's in agreement, right? It's easier for me to win a fight with you if I convince you that I'm going to win the fight, and then then that way I can defeat you without actually having to do anything. You're going to surrender just to avoid the conflict, right? Because think about it. Think about the opposite of that. If you have a sort of a construct, let's say like white supremacy, right? And let's say you have two people that get together and one person thinks he's superior to the other. Like think of it like two basketball teams. The Denver Nuggets and the LA Lakers get together and the Nuggets are convinced they're superior to the Lakers. Well, if the Lakers don't believe that, then it doesn't matter if the Nuggets have subscribed to Nugget supremacy. If the Nuggets believe they're better than the Lakers just don't care because they're like, well, we believe we're better than you. So in that context, any kind of supremacist construct isn't really going to work. So white supremacy doesn't just have the objective of convincing white Americans that they're better than Black people. It also has the objective of convincing Black people that others are better than us, right? And we honor white supremacy in many ways all throughout our society. If you talk about even the way we react to the things white people say versus the things that Black people say, I can point to 1,000 times where we might go ballistic because a white person said something, but we have no problem if a Black person, I don't know, just think about something like the N-word. If a Black guy says it on a song 10 times, it's like, whatever. But if a white guy says it one time and, in private, we go crazy. Like, oh my God, that's terrible. You're racist, blah, blah, blah. But you just got called the N-word 27 times on the radio and you completely look past that. And the people that were calling you the N-word were being paid by white folks to say that about you and to talk about you in that way. So personally, I think that when you talk about these constructs, I think accountability is critically important. We can't just say it's because of something that they're doing. It's also a matter of us questioning our beliefs about ourselves, right? So it says, so Dr. Anderson says here on page 2, Christopher Columbus discovered the new land that was to be America. In the same time frame that the Pope declared that Blacks from Africa should be made slaves. It was the promise of free land and free labor that fueled the rush of Europeans to settle the new land. To implement their plan for free labor, Europeans designed the relationship between Blacks and whites. So they designed this relationship, according to Dr. Anderson, so that when they got here, they had people that could work the land, clear the land, all that, right? Because all this free land had no value without having labor to actually do the work, clear out the trees and everything else. Plant the crops, all that stuff, right? So the social construct on race was formally stated in the Articles of the Confederation and restated in the Constitution of the United States, as well as the first immigration laws. I will discuss these documents in detail later in this book. The social construct on race is the thread that weaves through Black enslavement, U.S. Supreme Court rulings, laws, institutions, conservative and liberal ideologies, extra-legal, i.e. KKK activities, and all aspects of the nation's culture. It is fundamental to the founding of our country that Blacks would always be pressed to the bottom and that whites would always retain superiority over Blacks. That relationship endures to this day. The social construct on race was deliberate and permanent. It is so fundamental to the issue of race that the topic cannot be considered in any serious way without understanding it. It is therefore the first question in this book. So something came to mind here when Dr. Anderson was speaking on this, and I lost my thought, and it was one I wanted to share with you. I'm having my Mitch McConnell moment, so you'll gotta forgive me for a minute. By the way, I think all those poor old guys, they need to let them retire. Him, Trump, Biden, all of them need to retire. They all too old to be doing what they're doing. I guess I will come back to it. But basically, when Dr. Anderson talks about these constructs, I think it's extremely important. Oh, I get it. I know what it was. This is the point I wanted to make. This is a subtle point and a nuanced point that I think complicates the conversation on race and allows us to have it in, I think, what is a more intelligent way. Not every white person is out here looking rich. Not every white person is on top of the world. And so I think that the conversations on race become very confusing to some whites because they're like, wait a minute, what are you trying to say? I'm not, I'm not a millionaire. I'm not, making all this money just because I'm white, right? There's nothing about being white that says that you're going to be rich and wealthy and everything else. The way I see, the racial exchange of wealth and exploitation, everything else that's happened in this country, is that capitalism in its core, in terms of the evil version of capitalism that tends to be implemented in this country, it's not just designed to exploit and harm Black people. It's designed to exploit and harm anybody who has some weakness or vulnerability where wealth can be extracted. It reminds me of when Hillary Clinton ran for president and Barack Obama was about to take the seat that she felt belonged to her. She had an entitlement issue, right? She said, I'm Hillary, I paid my dues, I should be president, not this young guy coming along who's trying to, take something that belongs to me. And I remember Hillary did some dirty tricks that basically, leaned on the fact that Barack was Black and that people did not trust him to be a Black president. And so what were her actions racist? Absolutely. But they were driven more so by her greed and entitlement and her desire to use any weakness or any liability that she could possibly come up with to keep him out of the White House, to make sure she got what she felt she deserved. So when I look at capitalism in America, this is my point, and this is why it's important to teach wealth to your kids. This is very, very important. And not just teach it to them, but start investing for them now so they can have some wealth. And you go to BoyceWatkins.com. The $5 a day plan is all there. A lot of free stuff is there. You don't have to pay for it. But the thing about it is that when you really analyze capitalism, you see that greed and that entitlement tends to drive certain people that happen to be white to really extract wealth from any vulnerable community they can. So where race does enter the room, though, and where race is a legitimate claim for our people, is the fact that Black people were made to be the most vulnerable group because what they did was they put a laser on your head. They put a tracking device in your what's the word Dr. Anderson used? He used social construct. They created specific social constructs that specifically targeted you for the worst kind of exploitation. That's what they did. Right? So it's in a way, it's like the way prison inmates or people that were that have a felony are pushed to the bottom of society. Being Black kind of became a social construct that was equivalent to a felony. I mean, and like, for example, how many of you have heard, give me a yes if you've heard about these studies that say that a Black man with a criminal record is less likely to get hired or get a call back than a white guy. A Black guy with a degree is less likely to get a call back than a white guy with a criminal record. That's what it is. Anybody heard that? Yeah, like this stuff is so effectively that skin, that we have became a toxic brand. It became something that was branded in a certain way, just like you brand Nike sneakers. Like, the difference between a Gucci brand versus like a Walmart brand. Right? These are two recognizable brands, but you're not going to see Gucci in the same value as you see Walmart. Gucci and Tiffany and all that, that's up here. Walmart is down here. So Blackness became branded as kind of the Walmart of race, right? And so what then happens is that just like a Walmart product, pay attention now, because that's what they did to you, right? So just like a Walmart product, if I show up to a place and I say, look, I got these shoes from Walmart. It's made of the same material. It's got the same comfort level. It's got the same everything. In fact, it's better. In fact, we did surveys and people like these shoes better than those shoes. People are still gonna say, yeah, but those are Walmart shoes. I'm not paying Gucci or Coach prices for Walmart sneakers, right? For example, does anybody remember the experiment where Payless shoes rebranded themselves? Did y'all remember that? Well, they did kind of a sneaky trick on people, and they renamed the company Palazzi, and they went and they had Payless shoes, the same shoes you could buy, for $10 or $20, and they put them in this luxury boutique. They had all this fancy, decoration and made it look like this big fancy place. And they basically had people come in and they would try on the shoes. They say, oh, I like these. And they say, well, how much are they? Oh, these are $700. These are $900. These are $500. And people were willing to pay $700-800 for Payless shoes. Well, why is that? Well, because they didn't know that they were Payless shoes. They didn't see the branding, right? And when they found out that they were Payless shoes, they were stunned. They were shocked. Because if you took those same people into a Payless and showed them the same shoes and did the same fitting, they you say, well, how much are you willing to pay now? They'd say, oh, about $20. I'll pay $30 for these, right? So this, to me, when this is what I see again, because in fact, when I go to LA, I'm speaking in LA on the 8th and the 9th. We're doing a 2-day Black Wealth training camp. You can go to boycewatkins.com if you want to join us. But we'll talk about branding and what that looks like, how that works. Because a lot of you are building businesses, building brands, but what I see when I see these studies that say that, that when Black people and white people both submit their resume and they take the Black girl's name off the resume, like her name is no longer Shaquita, it's now, Lisa or whatever, or they change the white girl's name to a Black name, all the results change. Well, why does that change? Well, because they're branded very differently. And this is why you have to be really careful with the ownership of media. I prefer that media that is not owned by Black people simply keep Black people's names out of their mouths. That's why I just don't talk about us, don't feature us, don't put nothing up there about us, because you're misbranding us. You're branding us as gangsters and thugs and hoodlums and hoes and crazy people and everything else. So then what effectively occurs is that spills over onto you when you go and apply for a job and you say, I'm, an engineer and I was educated at the best schools or whatever. You're still not going to be seen the same as the white guy. You might be able to work your way out of some of that with what they call brand association. So if I'm a Black man who goes to Harvard, I can overcome some of my Blackness. Now, I'm still not going to be treated the same as a white guy who went to Harvard, but my Harvardness might overcome my Blackness. But the Black part is kind of this, it was turned into this liability that you are born with. And so you spend your life seeking to get into different spaces so you can get additional brand association, so you can almost wash the toxicity of being Black off of your skin. So that's why, for example, if I'm a Black man and I go to a big white university, I give them $100,000. I go to Duke University, I give them $200,000 to give me a degree, so I'm in debt. And then I go and I work at Google or Microsoft. Instead of building my own business, I work at Microsoft. So suddenly I'm not just a Black guy anymore. I'm the Black guy who went to Duke, who has Google and Microsoft on my resume, and all that brand association pulls me out of the fact that just 10 years ago I was just a Black guy, right? And so I think that it's important to even think about how you're valued. When you talk about how you're valued, let's just talk about that specific thing about getting the right job or whatever. Placement is extremely important. The thing about being valued is not about your intrinsic or your inherent value. It's about being in spaces where your value is actually seen and appreciated by others, where it's not being misrepresented or misbranded. For example, I saw a guy who explained, he said a bottle of water with the exact same water. He said that water might cost $1 in a gas station. It might cost $2 in a grocery store. It might cost, $4 in a fancy grocery store, and it might cost $6 on an airplane and $8 in a football stadium. The water is the same. The water has not changed. It is the location of the water that changes its value, right? So you get what I'm saying? So for you, I can speak to my own experience. When I was on the faculty of Syracuse and I was doing all these things in other spaces, all this stuff that I talked to you all about was seen as a nuisance. There were not people that said, we like the fact that you're Black and we want to hear all this pro-Black talk. No, they didn't like me because I was Black. They liked me despite the fact that I was Black, or they accepted me despite the fact that I was Black. So everything in me that was supposed to be an asset, all of my gifts, all the things that some people have given me awards for, was seen as a complete liability. So the best thing that happened, and I don't even know if I had the foresight to intentionally do this, it just happened that way, I can see it clearly now, is by moving into this space where being Black goes from being a negative to being a positive, and my so-called radical Blackness, right, where I'm reading books like Dr. Claude Anderson, goes from being a nuisance and a negative to being something good. Now I'm in a space where my value is seen, right? So effectively what I would encourage you to do, and really talk to your kids about this, is don't ever spend your life in places where you are not valued. Don't spend your life in a relationship where you're not valued. Like, do you know how miserable that is to try to love somebody and explain to them how how great, I'm a great woman. A lot of men would like a woman like me. Go find those men who would like a woman like you. Don't try to explain it to somebody who doesn't see the value. right? The same thing with men, vice versa, right? I think no matter what you're talking about, one of the biggest challenges that we have, and this is the reason why our communities get depleted and abandoned and nothing's being built, is because we're all running around looking for love in all the wrong places. And you know what happens when a little girl doesn't feel love and doesn't feel filled up with love from a secure source? What does she do? She goes around and she's kind of doing her Sukihana imitation. Y'all know Sukihana. She's the raunchiest, nastiest rapper in the history of the world. She puts Cardi B to shame. It's really disgusting, actually. And they go around sort of, giving themselves up to the highest bidder in hopes that somebody would give them the love that they're looking for, the love that they should have gotten from their father or whatever. So that self-love piece is so important. And so I like the way Dr. Anderson breaks it down with social constructs in terms of explaining that you have a lot of negative branding to overcome. I mean, in fact, there are even millions of Black people who see Black people in a negative light, right? So even when a Black person sees you coming, it's not always like, oh, wow, there's a Black person, that's great. It's like, oh man, there's a Black person trying to be my dentist. Black people can't be no dentist. I need the white dentist, right? That was the era that my grandmother kind of grew up in. I think we're growing out of that though. So let's read. Let's go. So we're reading Dr. Claude Anderson's book called The Black History Reader. We're on page 3. You can get a copy of his books at powernomics.com. And so let's read the next section. He says, question 2, are Black Americans an official socioeconomic underclass? Whether Black Americans are this nation's official underclass depends on the criteria used to define the term. In the broadest sense, an underclass is that segment of the population that occupies the lowest possible position in a ranking order of social acceptability. So let's start there. Let me ask you this. Do you think that Black people, based on that definition, are an underclass? Yes or no? Yeah. Lowest level of acceptability. I mean, immigrants come to this country and their families tell them don't hang out with African Americans. Don't get pregnant by a Black man. He's going to abandon the baby. I've heard all of that, right? That's what they say. The enactment of the nation's constitution in 1789 and the first naturalization law of 1790 established a rank order that placed whites at the top and entitled to all of society's benefits and consigned Blacks to the bottom rank with no entitlements, not even to life itself. The naturalization law declared America to be a white nation, with Blacks acceptable only as slaves. In subsequent years of Jim Crow, semi-slavery, and political correctness, a deliberate and carefully interlinked set of laws and public policies assured Black presence as a subordinated labor and consumer class. So it said that they wanted you around, but they never wanted you, they didn't want you to go back to Africa, because you go back to Africa, they can't exploit you. If you go back to Africa, they'd have nobody to buy all their products. So he's saying that they wanted you around, but they wanted you around as like a sidekick. They kind of need, they need you around for, to support whatever they're doing, right? So like if I don't know, it's almost like like some little kid who likes to sing and dance and make some other kid like listen and cheer for him while he's singing and dancing. Like they kind of want, they need you sort of in the backdrop, right? You have a role in society. They don't want you to go anywhere. They really love you, but they love you in the same way. I think the same way they love their dog, or the same way they love their their cat, right? They love their dog, but they don't see their dog as a member of the family. They love their dog, but they would never let the dog like run the household. They love their dog, but they would not want the dog to sit at the dinner table with the humans, right? But if Fluffy runs away, they're gonna cry. They're gonna go put up signs. They're gonna say, "Where's my dog? Bring my dog back!" Right? So to some extent, I'm not saying that we're seen exactly in that way, but if you think about slavery, we were kind of seen in the same way. We certainly weren't seen as human, right? So anyway, consequently, Black people became the designated official underclass, and it has yet to be repudiated or changed. Until that happens, Blacks are restricted to conditions that place them outside and beneath mainstream society. Governmental agencies and scholars have broadened and modernized the definition of an underclass as any group in America that lives as if they were in a poverty-stricken country. This immigration-based, politically correct public policy is designed to shift the nation's focus from Blacks to Hispanics, Asians, and other immigrating ethnicities. However, the gesture changes nothing in the original underclass designation, because immigrant groups have always ranked above Blacks in the order of social and political acceptability. Immigrant groups are credentialed by federal authorities and are granted access to benefits. I gotta be careful because reading this stuff in public is what got my Instagram page taken down. But my new Instagram is Dr Boyce Finance. So if you want to follow me on Instagram, feel free to go to Dr Boyce Finance. Be careful with the fake pages though, because there's a lot of, I didn't know there's so many fake Boyce Watkins pages out here. So if I pop up in your IG or in your inbox asking you to sign up for a crypto website or something crazy like that, that's not me. So be careful out there. All right. As soon as the next generation loses its accent, even those with some color are accepted as white and moved into the middle and upper classes. Blacks as a caste have never had the class mobility granted to immigrants. The U.S. Census chart below, real median household income by race and origin of households from 1967 to 2014 shows how blacks stayed fixed in an underclass income status. It depicts the racial hierarchy in our society and presents the reality that blacks are fixed at the lowest income level. So basically what this chart says, and I can just describe it to you, is it shows average income per race going all the way back to 1967. In 1967, black people were the lowest between whites, non-Hispanic whites, Hispanics, and also Asian. We were the lowest in 1967. We're the lowest now. At no point in this history anywhere have we ever moved from any place other than last place. This has been very consistent. He says the census chart on the right shows that at the peak of the 1967 civil rights movement, white median household income was $52,200, which was double the median household income of blacks. The chart also depicts the changed immigration policies that, in response to the 1965 civil rights law, so they used our movement, right, to do this. Our movement drove this. They opened the doors for immigrants based upon ethnicity and family ancestry. The newly arriving immigrants were classified as minorities and made eligible for the benefits and opportunities that blacks have been historically denied. The massive influx of Hispanic immigrants began in 1970, and the U.S. Census chart indicates that at the outset, their incomes began at $38,900, well above the income of blacks. So they started with an income that was higher than yours. And let's see here. Well above the income of blacks. By 2014, Hispanic income had reached $42,500, which is $7,000 higher than blacks, even though 90% of all Hispanics in America in 2014 have been in the country for less than 45 years. Similarly, in the late 1980s, Asians who had been combined in the classification with Arabs began to enter the country. Their median household income was $64,000 by 2014. Their median income of $74,300, okay, median, was double that of Black Americans. Okay, so I don't know which one is on the chart. Yeah, the median income of Asian families in 2014 was $74,300. For blacks, it's $35,400, so nearly double. Okay, let's keep going. It is noteworthy that the U.S. Census chart indicates that not only that all groups entered with higher incomes than blacks, but by 2014, the median household income for all groups was up, while the income for Native Black Americans was headed down. The downward trend for blacks further indicates that as a group, they are the nation's official underclass. This explains, people, why you have to start businesses in your community, in your family. You have to change the whole, like, let me work for Mr. White Man model of economic success. It ain't going to work in the future. You got immigrants, you got AI, you got conservatives that have been killing labor unions since the 1960s. I mean, the only hope, that we had to really improve our standard of living back in the day was a lot of people lived in places like Detroit, Milwaukee, Gary, Indiana, and they worked at the auto plant, right, where they had good unions and good salaries and all that stuff, and all that stuff's been killed. The average American worker's income is dropping every year. It's even gone down in a year where inflation was insanely high. So this is not a winning strategy. So you're going to have to rip up the playbook. And really look at it as if you're an alien. Like, just say, okay, if I was an alien trying to figure out how to survive on Earth, what would I do? And you have to study from the ground up. Look at what's working. Don't look at what your parents did and your grandparents did, because the world is changing. By the way, this book, for those of you who are asking, it's called The Black History Reader. It's written by Dr. Claude Anderson. His website is powernomics.com. Also, just another a few housekeeping items. My new book is called The 10 Commandments of Black Economic Power. There's lots of free stuff on my website, boycewatkins.com. You can find out about our event in LA on September 8th. We're doing a Black Wealth training camp for 2 days in Los Angeles. And also the All Black National Convention happens October 20th in Atlanta at the Marriott Marquis Hotel. So if you're B1 Black First and you want to hang out with other intelligent Black people, the All Black National Convention is a great place to be. So feel free to go to allblacknationalconvention.com and also my website, boycewatkins.com. I put a lot of stuff there too. All right, so let's keep going. A report by the Urban Institute, The Color of Wealth in the Nation's Capital, the subject of an article in the Washington Post on November 2nd, 2016. It says the grim statistics in this article on Black wealth reinforce the census chart and are further evidence that Blacks as a group are the nation's official underclass. The Urban Institute report pointed out that in the District of Columbia region, the net worth of white households was 81 times that of Black households. Whites had a net worth of $284,000, and the net worth of Blacks was only $3,500. I'm going to stop for a minute because I need us to really sit on that for a minute. I need us to